Hello, I'm Darren Bentley and welcome to another episode of the From the Beehole End podcast. Christmas is upon us, with very little festive cheer at Turf Moor following 7 straight defeats and 9 in 11 Premier League games. Even the most optimistic of supporters out there are left wondering where to point the finger of blame, or indeed where the next point's coming from. And helping us dissect that and all the other big questions are Andrew Greaves and watching it all unravel from Cleveland in Ohio, Paul Woodhouse. Gents, where to begin? Are we feeling like Christmas might bring a change in fortunes, or are we feeling a little bit Grinch-like? I'll start with you, Greaves, because you've got a bit of a resemblance to the Grinch.
I was just thinking that. I do look a bit Grinch-like, don't I? Yeah, I mean, a trip to Bournemouth this weekend. I mean, I know they've not been in great form, but probably showed a bit more spark and fight than we have in a lot of games against United on Monday night. And it's, yeah, I mean, I am usually quite optimistic. I think I am often declared one of the more optimistic of the pod squad. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Darren. Coming into the Christmas period, which is busy anyway, where the next point's coming from. I mean, we're looking for a Christmas miracle, aren't we?
What about you? When it's Christmas cancelled?
It seems yeah. Never started. It'll never finish. Whatever. It seems like an eternity ago, doesn't it, when we went down and basically thrashed him in cup. And I don't think that's going to happen this weekend by any stretch. They're a good side at Bournemouth, and they at least know how to get back into a game, and they know how to give people a game. And I think they will definitely give us more than a game. It's more a question of how equipped we are to give them a game. And I'm not too sure, to be fair.
Well, it's not helped, of course, by the fact that we'll be missing players for AFCON, which is probably something that most Premier League clubs are going to have to handle, but Bournemouth come out there full strength, which is probably a symbol of what's likely to happen at the weekend. Andrew, there's been a lot of chat online. I've been kind of following a little bit of chat online about whether Burnley are suffering a little bit from from a fatigue point of view, or whether it's a tactical problem that we have in the side. I mean, we haven't put a full 90 minutes in yet. Very rarely we put 90 minutes in this season. Sunderland and Leeds probably as close as we've got to that. What do you think the main problem lies? Fitness or tactics?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the fitness thing quite a bit, because I do think, like, everyone talks to me, everyone sends me a message saying, why aren't we more intense? Why aren't we able to kind of get to a level and keep it at that level? Like, you know, you look at Sunderland and they are just constantly at it. They are just, you know, gung-ho. You look at Leeds and they've got an energy for 90 minutes. And again, sometimes it's the crowd at Ellen Road. We look like a team that, and it could be the tactics, because I'll come on to the tactics side of things. But it just looks like we're really bad at managing energy levels. So we start off really good, and then we have to have a period where we just naturally drop back, and we don't press as much, and we're not as impactful, and we're not as intense. And then we come out after half time, and we usually start all right, and we've got a bit more. So it's either a management of energy levels, or it is that kind of, in kind of cycling terms, if you're having to do a chase, you're having to do lots of hard work and then you have to settle back in. You have to do lots of hard work and settle back in. You know, you watch the Tour de France, that's the kind of thing. So maybe from a sporting level, we're just not able to kind of find a level which is intense and has intent, without it being either 100% or then dropping back down to 35, 40%. And a lot of people see that as a perceived lack of effort. And I wonder whether that's the fitness. On the tactics side of things, something I noticed against Fulham, which made me think it's not necessarily a fitness thing, but a Scott Parker tactical game of chess almost. The kind of pressing along that front line where we had Breuer, we had Ugachukwu, we had Foster, we had Brun Larson. It felt like if a Fulham player moved into another Burnley player's zone, they just retreated. You know, like on the old computer games where you get towards an enemy, and then if you moved away, they'd stop following you and they'd go back to their position. It felt a bit like that, which was really kind of... It's the first time I've noticed it in that kind of... it being that open. Now, that might be because, it was Breuer, and Breuer seemed to be the one early in the Fulham game who wanted to do the chasing, but he kind of almost got to a point where he'd come up against an invisible wall and he turned back even if he was only 3 yards away from the player he was chasing down, because that was Florentino's player or that was Ugochukwu's zone in which to operate. So I'm at a real loss. Initially, I thought it was fitness, and now I wonder whether, it just looked weird. I've never seen a football match play out like that when we were attacking. I actually went back and watched. I was like skipping through the full replay on the website to try and look for patterns. And I saw a few of them patterns where, like I say, Breuer, and I think Breuer, you let Breuer loose, and if he's fit and he's starting to look really fit, he could be that person who gives you that big energy up front. The energy that we always think we get out of Hannibal, because he looked like he was really capable. There were once or twice, and I'll try and clip it up and we perhaps share it on social, where he just kind of gets to a point and then goes, oh, actually, that's not my zone, I've got to go back. Almost as though Scott Parker's there with his little kind of joystick and he's switched players. It's weird.
Yeah, we've rarely been a side that presses high up the pitch in numbers. That's not really our game, is it? And I guess it's in some ways it may be an unfair question because we're not armed with the statistics that the analysts and the performance team at the club will be labour webbing. When I was there, you would literally on a Monday morning walk in and there would be a thick document which documented every player's movements in a game, how far they'd run, how many sprints they'd done, how many recovery runs they'd done, and those stats are readily available now to all sides. So it's not like Scott Parker and his team won't be aware of anybody that isn't necessarily putting the hard yards in, and that might be why some people don't get a place in the side, by the way. But Woody, what are your thoughts on whether fitness or tactics, or even whether it's just a combination of both, is really at the core of the problems we have at the minute?
I think there's a little bit of both. And I think one thing that doesn't kind of get talked about is that when you come up from the Championship, you've got to be 10% quicker because games are 10% longer in the Premier League because of VAR. That period now towards the end of games where teams have to be fitter for the last, it's not just the last couple of minutes, it can very easily be the last 10. It's now Fergie time all the time, isn't it? And so it's a longer game, weirdly enough, in the Premier League than
against
it is,
cricket players.
Arguably. Exactly. And so you've got to want, and you can't teach pace. You cannot train to be quicker. You can train to have more stamina, but that obviously takes something over time in order to be able to catch up to that kind of stuff. But also there's the tactical thing with Mr. Parker being a little bit more of a little bit more up the pitch press resistant than most managers, isn't it? But then again, that comes down to fitness levels, stamina, and the actual pace. And there isn't a lot of God-given pace, especially in that front three. There's only Hannibal brings that energy. And so you can see why he's picked as a number 10 just to harry around and to do pressing on his own. So I think it's a little bit of a combination of all three. But I can't imagine that the step up is that easy for quite a lot of players.
Mm. Managers, of course, have a few tools in their armoury. The form and fitness of players is one. The team selections is a big one for managers. But when it gets to this time of the year, of course, I think we're 3 games away now from January, and that will be the halfway point of the season. There comes this magical window where we can throw the cash at problems and try and resolve them. But this week there was an alarming little comment made by David Unsworth. And I thought it was probably worth clipping that up and listening to it now. Here's what David Unsworth told BBC Radio Lancashire earlier this week.
Scott tells me they haven't got any money to spend in January. They might have some, but not enough to make the difference that it would need. And then you've got the question of, I've got to attract players. So players will be looking at it thinking, well, they're going down. They're already in the Championship, so I'm not going to commit myself to a permanent deal here at Burnley. So they're in a difficult situation.
Greavesy, that's not what you want to hear when you're stuck on 10 points, cut adrift at the bottom and hoping that January is going to bring a magic wand and new players and a fresh outlook.
Yeah, and we've often talked about kind of January not being a great time to really kind of do any business because there's inflated prices and things like that. But interestingly, I think this January is probably a good time to do business because it's a World Cup year. There's going to be a hell of a lot of players not getting a game at their club. looking for a move. Now, some teams might decide that they're going to cash in on these, World Cup seeking assets. And if we've not got the cash to pay for them, then it's not great. So we may already have been relying on a loan deal or two to get us through, and there may be one or two really interesting loan deals available because of that looming World Cup in North America. But certainly, if you're a Burnley fan and you're sat there going, "Oh, we've not got long until the window opens," and poor David Unsworth kind of, shoots a massive arrow through your Christmas dreams with that. And it's interesting, like I say, with these kind of things, I always go kind of, I wonder how Unsy knows Scott Parker or something like that. But like you said, Daz, before we start recording, football's a village. Everybody knows everybody. I mean, David's obviously around, Northwest. I think he's still over Chorley way, so he's not a million miles away from the club. And it's not, clearly Scott Parker has lots of friends in football, but he was very candid, wasn't he? I wonder whether Scott Parker kind of says to him, bloody hell, you threw me under the bus a little bit there, to use the kind of in vogue saying, more Salah and that lot. But I just think sometimes it's not helpful. Is it kind of against what we thought might happen? I honestly didn't expect us to spend a lot in January. But it's that, I think the loaded bit is the bit where he says, well, not enough to make a difference. Now, if the manager thinks there's not enough money there to make the difference, it just feeds into that kind of, I wonder what Scott Parker's thinking.
You need a lot of money in this league to make a difference. That's one thing I would say. But the additional point to that is Woody, that not only has he got to try and sign players, he's got to try and tempt players into a relegation battle. And I know Greavesy says the World Cup's there as a bit of a distant target for people who aren't playing necessarily. So, and that's probably what you're looking at, players who aren't playing at the minute. But how do you sell the dream? How do you sell Burnley to these players when you've gone 7 games without wins? We said at the start, lost 9 and 11. You're getting cut adrift. Sell Burnley to me, Woody. Come on, sell it to me.
I think what Greasy said with regards to getting some game time, it doesn't matter where you are in the Premier League, it's still the Premier League, and it's going to get you fairly fit, fairly fast if you're wanting a competition in the summer. But I think obviously we're also financial fair play rules. It doesn't matter if you gave us 300 million, 500 million or whatever, we can't spunk that. We can't spend it, because what are we at? 102% of wages against actual income. We're in a fairly financial tricky situation. So this idea that we could buy ourselves into a fairly reasonable position come January is incorrect. So it's whether we could attract people or not, we can't afford them, and we can't go down that route.
And that then brings us back to Scott Parker in the dressing room, getting their heads together and saying, we're a band of brothers. It's us against the world, effectively. Not worked well so far, but who knows?
Yeah, I believe the latest episode of Keeping the Faith is looking at how the morale of the squad will keep us. I not had a chance to watch it yet, and like I say, I've been a big fan of those this year. But I think, this is a thing. This kind of band of brothers. Interestingly, I know there's not been a press conference today for the manager, but there's some quotes from Jadon Anthony, and he came out and said, look, we believe in the manager and the way he sets us up. He referenced the fact that he switched off at the back post against Palace, which again is, very candid. Players these days tend to, hide away from these things. And, I think there's an honesty. I mean, Parker always talks about an honesty within the group and things like that. And that's the big thing that I always took from Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche should always talk about an honesty within the group, and you just hope that actually this week they've reflected on that in an honest way and, kind of said, look, it's, we need to ship up, or, we're going to find ourselves being championship players again, because no matter what the manager does, and we can whinge about the manager, starting Foster ahead of an actual winger, and, we can discuss whether we're employing the right tactics and things. But ultimately, I think the players do have to take a massive responsibility. And whilst the numbers might suggest that they're running and tracking as they are, them lapses in concentration cannot continue, and Jadon Anthony alluded to that. And you just hope there's enough characters in that dressing room to kind of go, look, lads, this isn't good enough. You kind of saw it with Cullen having a bit of a go at a couple of players last week. I think he had a go at Dubravka when Ekdal got himself in a bit of a twist and ended up heading it out for a corner, which I think indirectly led to the second goal. You know, little bits like that where you just kind of go, look, we've got to be on it, and maybe a couple of players are taking Premier League life for granted, but it's not going to be there for long if they carry on like this.
The tricky bit is, of course, you may as a group feel you're not good enough. You know, and there could be a bit of blind faith in there. You look at the Ashes squad at the minute. England gone to Australia thinking they're going to romp the Ashes. Didn't play a lot of cricket before they went there. Got themselves battered in the first two tests, and there may be an element of that in the squad that, you know, we keep talking about we've got the talent in the squad. Maybe we just haven't got the talent, Woody.
We've said it all along, and it's very difficult for the likes of Burnley at the best of times, but especially since Sean Dyche left, this period of this idea of having to do contingency planning to go up and try and be competitive, and then having that wage bill once you've come back down again, and then having to manage that and spiral, trying to work out the financials with the playing side, it's not sustainable. It just simply isn't, and it's always going to be catching up with us. And at some point, and now with financial fair play rules, it's only going to go one particular way. We're going to have to take as medicine at some point and try and steady the ship, really. And I don't think a lot of Burnley fans are quite prepared to have that as a conversation necessarily, because I think it's more existential than just, are they putting the effort in? Of course they are. And yes, maybe they're not good enough in order to do that. But that is more of a structural, financial, club organisational piece than it is to do with Scott Parker.
Finances, of course, will always be an issue. You know, the ownership, the current ownership, have never been very public with the finances at the club and how many investors we have, and all those kind of things are very, very secretive. But I noticed that the FAB released some minutes, the Fan Advisory Board released some minutes this week of proposed consultations between them and the club that highlighted a few things. And, you know, there's a bit of fundraising in there, you know, percentages of 3 to 5% on season tickets proposed, standardisation of concessions, which includes raising senior citizens up a level to marry in with the sort of pension ages, surcharges on direct debits, auto-enrolment for cup games. There's a lot to go at here. And I suppose one of the questions I have is, I mean, in the Premier League, those margins are so minute, they're dwarfed by the broadcast money. So why put yourself through that anyway? And why antagonise a fan base over 3 or 5% season tickets? Now, there's an argument there that I know back in Barry Kilby and Mike Garlick's days where they didn't put season tickets up for many years. And if you fall behind, you then suddenly feel you have to put a whopping increase in to bring yourself back in line, whereas steady increases, just like everything else in life, just keeps you at the level of inflation. But Greavesy, on a bigger picture stuff, what did you think of the FAB minutes and where that stands in sort of consultations with the club?
Yeah, I mean, there was an interesting one about investors where it was a bit like, we've got enough investors, but we always want more, which was this ridiculous line. This kind, we're not going to tell you how many investors we've got or who we've got. There is, interestingly, a list of people with shares that is doing the rounds as a PDF on Up the Clarets. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the wider FAB Fan Advisory Board and this season ticket issue, I'll pick apart a couple of bits. I mean, first of all, I think the Clarets Trust alluded to there being a consultation when they decided they weren't going to sign the kind of supporting letter for the Football Supporters Association's campaign to free season tickets for 2 years. And I kind of remembered that there, but I wasn't really sure what the consultation was, etc. We then get the Fan Advisory Board minutes, which are hidden away in kind of, you know, the dark recesses next to the Phil Kavanagh profile on the website, and kind of,
That's
he
my
came up as a
homepage,
Facebook
yeah.
person I might know, so I might add him and see if we'll bring him on. But you know, they're literally kind of like a PDF somewhere of the minutes, and it talks about kind of, you know, this is what we're proposing, and the Fan Advisory Board have been given a full month until the next meeting with senior club officials on December 10th to kind of get in their viewpoint. And my thought process is why didn't any member of the Fan Advisory Board on Twitter, and I know there's NDAs and all this kind of bullshit, kind of say, look, there is a consultation out about season ticket prices. Now, the 3 to 5% increase, I think people would stomach. I think there's a natural. It's been frozen for 2 years. I support the FSA being, the 2-year freeze. And I should just say as well, the Burnley FC Independent Sports Association alerted me and other members of the Burnley FC ISA to the minutes with an email saying, we're sending you this email because basically the minutes are out and we've suddenly discovered that there's a consultation, and the consultation ended before wider fan awareness was able to be achieved. So kudos to the steering group on the new Burnley FC ISA, which we've had on this show as well. So that really pissed me off, that I'm kind of finding out about this after the horse has bolted. But yeah, we've had a freeze for 2 years. I know the senior citizens and the concessionary rates went up last year. I know adult season tickets stayed the same, but Peter, who I go on with, I think his season ticket went up by about 60-odd%. It was cheap, obviously, as a senior citizen, but it went up quite a bit. So for me, the 3 to 5%, I'm kind of going, I don't want to pay it, but if I have to pay it, that'll be fine. I'm almost certain mine was frozen last year. Maybe not. Maybe it was a small increase. I think it was a small increase, actually. So scrap what I just said. But for me, it's some of the other bits. I mean, the surcharge on direct debit, I think, will hit people. There is a suggestion that it could mean that they're not doing it in-house and they may go with a credit facility, as we've had previously, I should say. We have had a credit facility previously. Now, I then worry about kind of whether people will get credit, because we're not talking 40 quid. We're talking, 2 adults, 2 children. You're probably looking at the best part of a grand. So does that put extra pressure on? If it is just a surcharge,
predominantly.
Again, it may put people. Yeah, it may put people off, but then it's the kind of standardising concessionary ticket, moving the goalpost when it comes to senior citizens, which again, you might kind of go, well, it's in line with government pensions and things like that. That's society. But how many people are 64 this year thinking next season we get that, I've been supporting this club for 40 odd years, 50 odd years, finally get a bit of kickback, get my senior citizens. Oh, you can't do it next year. You've got to wait until the year after. That will put people off. And then this auto enrolment for cup games. I mean, I do go on cup games. I'm one of them, saddos that goes on a cup game on a Tuesday night because there's nothing else better to do. But I want the choice. I don't want to be kind of like, well, you've got to pay for a cup ticket whether you go on or not, or can I opt out of it? If I opt out of it, does that then mean, like at some Premier League clubs, if I opt out 3 or 4 times, I'm not guaranteed a season ticket the year after? Now, I do think we're not in that situation because there's not enough demand for people to sit where I sit. There's empty seats around me. But I just wonder kind of the optics of all this when you've just gone on a 7-match losing streak. You're in the bottom 2, rooted in the bottom 2. It's just very typical bad optics when really you want all the goodwill. And like you said, Daz, the margins are minor for a football club compared to TV rights deals and player sales and, everything else. I mean, ALK have done a really bad job of bringing in non-TV revenue, haven't they? Let's be honest. They are. There's not a lot you can do with a turf, when there's not a match on. It's kind of not big enough to hold certain functions, big awards do, especially now they've split the kind of James Hargreaves North Stand hospitality down. I just it's just cloth-eared, isn't it? That's the problem. It's just, why die on a hill like that?
The cup enrolment schemes are a really strange one, because if it's going to be compulsory, that's going to be really tricky, because you've got the Millwall game coming up, for instance, in the FA Cup third round, when you're going to have half the stadium closed, 5,000 or 6,000 fans on. Now, that might be the reason they're trying to do it, is to force 16,000, 17,000 fans on to a Millwall Cup game. But that's not going to wash with fans. Fans aren't going to have that, I don't think. So that's a really tricky one. But it is a funny one, this, isn't it? These consultations with FABs, and I'm not just talking Burnley here, quite a few other clubs as well. Are they consultations? Or are they basically just a fait accompli because they've already decided what they're going to do? All they're doing is asking you to be the mouthpieces.
It's a nod and a wink. It's not that consultation that we should be worried about. It's all the other consultations that we should be worried about. This is peak consulting, where the folks that you bring in to look at ticket prices put ticket prices up by the same amount that they'll be charging to tell you about those ticket prices. The amount of money that they're getting off 3 to 5% is sweet jack shit. When you think about the amount of debt we've got to service, that's also a drop in the ocean. So it's like, yeah, and the FAB thing is good intention. I've absolutely got no problem with anybody on the FAB, but it's like one of those things that when you look at kind of the Premier League regulations, we seem to be a little bit more hampered than what the regulations actually stipulate, with regards to NDAs and all that kind of thing. So it is just pandering at the end of the day. And so it's ineffective. It's not really a voice for the fans, even though they're doing the best job that they've been given. And it's similar to the rest of Burnley, isn't it? Scott Parker's doing the best job he can do with the hand that he's been given, and it pretty much always comes back to ownership and ALK.
Mm. I mean, I'm a little bit Portraiture and gamekeeper here, and I saw the other side of the football club when I was there. Never too heavily into the financial side of things, but what has always bothered me since I've become a fan and nothing else is what is perceived to be a lack of investment off the pitch in the stadium itself. Now, ALK have done some really good things. I mean, the stadium looks terrifically, with all the LEDs and stuff. But it does feel a bit like lipstick on a pig. It does feel like behind the scenes in the concourses, I've got a pint of pints and I can't put either down because there's no shelves. That's just a little example. It does feel like there's an underinvestment at that level, at the fan level, where if this money goes to it, fans would be more of a willing participant in it. But surely this money's just going to go on the pitch, or it's going to be perceived to be going on the pitch.
Yeah, I agree. And, they always talk about, we can't have a proper food offering. We've got to basically just have hot dogs and pies in most areas of the ground because there's not the ventilation on the concourse. Spend some fucking money putting ventilation in. We are showing up. I'm a big follower of the Footy Scran social media accounts. You've got lower league clubs with better value offerings than we have, right? And I just, it blows my mind that they manage most match days to cock up the cooking of Hafner's pies, which I am a Hafner's pie connoisseur, as you can probably tell. They're not that difficult to warm up, but constantly they're asking advice on how can we make the pies better, how can we warm up better? And it's a bit like, just get that right. If somebody said to me, look, we're going to spend some money on that, and I don't know how the kind of pre-order screens like you get in McDonald's are working on the lower concourse. They're only on there because they're a bit wider. But it's that kind of like, we got this company in to provide, catering services, levy.co.uk, whatever they are, Levy. And it's nothing's changed. They've got better pies in Hafner's. It's still the same hot dogs. You still can't have onions with the hot dogs, I don't think. It's kind of, I asked for a Twix or a chocolate bar the other day, a couple of games ago, because I didn't want some at hot, and they were like, we've no chocolate. It's like, what do you have? It's like, we got crisps. It's like, I don't want crisps, I want a chocolate bar. It's a bit like, I don't think there's a massive rush on Twixes at that particular match. You know what I mean? There never usually is. So somebody's cocked up the ordering, and you just think, just get that bit right. I think you, Daz, or somebody else, maybe Simon said, there's all these consultants we're employing. Who are these consultants consulting? Maybe
Not
it's just members of the FAB. Yeah, maybe just members of the FAB. But it's the constant, and I feel for members of the FAB because they take a lot of flack. Now, there is a bit of we know something we're not going to tell you about some of the members, but also they're just AOK's mouthpieces. They're just out there to kind of go, go and spread the gospel, go and defend it, go and do what you have to do. But even then, the last kind of thing that they kicked back on, which was the switch around in the cricket field stand, and they were dead against it. And to be fair to them, they were quite, they were quite strong on their oppositions. AOK did it anyway. Without getting too boring, it reminds me of the overview scrutiny committees at councils when we brought in executive style decision making, and they went, we're going to have scrutiny committees. And I went to loads of meetings in the early 2000s with like local government departments and things like that. And they're just, we don't want you to do it. all right, yeah, we've considered that, but we're going to do it anyway. And that's what the fab is. The fab is absolutely pointless in its current guise. And that's not a slight against the people on it who give their time, and there's a lot of brilliant people on that fans advisory board. But there's not the mechanism in place to make that fans advisory board anything other than an advisory board. Somebody who can kind of go, we're not very keen on that, you know. Well, there you go. You know, they asked about bringing the Supporters Player of the Year award back. We've no plans to bring the Supporters Player of the Year award back. But you get more access to players now because you can go to training sessions, you can go on the Claret carpet. You can, as long as you buy a membership and you get lucky in a ballot. You know, the whole thing at the minute is just bullshit. It's all about squeezing as much money out of people as possible. You know, and people will not stick it. And, you know, I'm a member of the Burnley FC ISA, and, you know, if people want real action, the ISA basically brought up the parking of away team coaches as you come out of the North Stand. They were moved. You know, people don't have to join these boards. They don't have to join the Clarets Trust. They don't have to put themselves forward for the fab. But I'm very pleased that I took my membership with the ISA because, like I said, this week I got that email to say, hey, up, your season ticket might be going up. And because you pay on direct debit, we might charge you even more. And the bloke you go on with might no longer be eligible for his senior citizens. He's well over 70. He'll be fine. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, and you might have to go and watch Burnley versus fucking Stevenage in a cup game you don't really want to go to. Bullshit.
Bloody hell, Woody. Take his belt and laces off him before he gets too late.
All I'm thinking is a new bar line. Hafner's pies. They can't be that difficult to warm up. I'm quite liking that, Greavesy.
Woody, lighten the mood. We've got Bournemouth this weekend. We touched on it at the start. What do you expect?
I can't lighten the mood on that. It's going to be a tough one, isn't it? I mean, the fact that Bournemouth, in one way, Bournemouth should be a little bit of a North Star in that the way they were languishing not too long ago and managed to turn it around, albeit with considerable decent spending. But you know, they're in the kind of position that we feel that we should be, and the amount of money that we have spent, we should be in that position, or at least competing at that level. But we just don't seem to be, and we'll find out yet again on Saturday as to how far off we actually are.
And the fact that they've got such a low fan base, the capacity tells you exactly what we touched about before, which is that those 3 and 5% on seed tickets make so little difference. It's all about investments at the top. Greavesy, are you looking forward to a bit of Christmas cheer, or are we going to be going into Christmas absolutely fucking miserable?
I mean, I will be anyway because I'm that kind of person. But I'm kind. I don't know. I keep thinking about that cup game there under Vincent Kompany where we really kind of. It kind of gives you hope that kind of bloody hell we can compete at that level. I mean, the following season showed that we were nowhere near. But I don't know. I just wonder whether it's the kind of perfect game away from the noise. It's about as far away from Turf Moor as you can get for a fixture. I just wonder whether, you know, because Foster's at AFCON and we wish him all the best, he's not going to play. There's a little bit of nuance for those who like a bit of nuance. And then he's going to be forced to play somebody. Now, it might be Jayden Anthony going back to his old club, but it might just be he might just kind of look and go, this might be the game for Marcus Edwards. You know, I don't know. Part of me just kind of thinks, I don't know, maybe we see Josh Laurent come in that central midfield for a bit more work rate. I'd be going Pires. I'd probably be bringing Worrell in for Ekdal. He might just look at this game and kind of go, you know what? There's a bit of a chance before Christmas to just get something on the road. A point, 3 points would be fantastic. So I'm not as fearful of that trip to Bournemouth. I mean, as we could end up doing the debrief on Sunday or the rapid reaction on Saturday and going, Christ almighty, we've just been spanked 3-0. I just wonder whether it's a game nobody's expecting us to win, whereas perhaps Palace at home, Fulham at home, we kind of went in with that expectation of we just have to roll these over and we're back on track. I don't know. Maybe he's forced into making changes. You know, he's got players coming back, Walker, Pires. I don't know. I'm not confident, but I'm quite weirdly looking forward to Saturday at 3:00.
We have used the term deck chairs and Titanic, and I think you've just rearranged the whole deck there for us, Andrew.
I mean,
One thing I would say is
yeah.
they trolled us. The club have actually trolled us by putting Marcus Edwards on the graphic. Now, if ever there was a sign, Woody,
of him not even making the squad. That's it, innit? That's exactly how I see ALK. God bless him. But I think looking at it again, if you were to take out all the ridiculous mistakes that we've seen, and a lot of these results that we've seen over these past few weeks, these past 7 losses on the bounce, have been down to individual errors. It's not necessarily been down to the performance. Now, if you can cut the shit out, and people like Hartman can like kick his leg up past his hip, and just basics for footballers and things like that, then you never know. We may be able to squeak out a little result, because the performances, I'd argue, have been infinitely better game to game than I'd say under VK. Under VK, we were getting tubbed every week and didn't even look like we were ever going to get into a game until sometime after January, and he'd fallen out with everybody. But it's just those individual errors, and whether if we manage to sort that out on Saturday, then we've got a chance.
there you go, Scott. If ever you needed a motivational quote for the dressing room, cut the shit out is the one you need. And I think we'd better leave it there. Hopefully the boys do cut the shit out, and they'll be back on Saturday night, our lads, to talk about it in the debrief. And hopefully we're not talking about shit. We're talking about a Christmas present in the form of 3 points. That remains to be seen. But until then, we wish you a very Merry Christmas from the sort of midweek podcast. The lads will be back at the weekend. And until then, up the Clarets.